technology officer at a company called Interactive One. But also, I've been involved in technology for about 20 years now. Involved in specifically what I like to call urban-oriented technology for the past 10 years. And really what my passion has been working to, over the last couple of years, connect people to what I call the digital opportunity. And what I mean by that is helping people to understand that the opportunities that exist today in technology are too good to ignore, and also recognizing that there's a large portion of us, a large portion of our demographic, namely minorities and women, who are not involved, who are not taking advantage of this technology opportunity. I keep seeing examples of it in my day job, everything people I come in contact with, and I've come to realize that if we don't figure out a pathway to change that, then we're going to end up with a digital underclass. We're going to end up with a group of people who cannot achieve the same economic parity as another group of people just because of their lack of knowledge and understanding of technology. So with that being said, I wanted to create a program. I actually came up with the idea for this program in January, coming from a New Year's Eve church service. Divine idea gave to me to launch the Close the Divide project. So with that, creating an environment and atmosphere where the conversations can start to be had around technology as it relates to entrepreneurship, as it relates to job creation, as it relates to education, as it relates to medical information, as it relates to just overall empowerment, and helping us understand the opportunities or lack of opportunities in this given field, right? And I look at it from a little different vantage point than most. Most people, when you talk about the digital divide or the digital opportunity, people will most say that minorities are shut out and that minorities don't have the opportunity to be involved, and they haven't given the opportunity to be funded. I actually don't 100% agree with that. I believe that there's fault on both sides. Yes, you could say the environment, the ecosystem hasn't been welcoming to these groups. You could say from the outset it appears that they aren't being funded at the same level, they aren't given the same opportunities. But I actually think that the root of the problem is on our end in a couple areas. One is not understanding what it takes to be involved, to take advantage of technology, one. Secondly, really around not exposing ourselves to the opportunities that are available to us and doing the work. And then the most important one is I believe that we as minorities have what I call a perception problem. We don't perceive that technology is of value to us in our everyday lives. Of course, we'll use it on our phones, we'll check into Facebook and Twitter, but we never look at it from an opportunity to create viability for us. And I see that more than not in our youth. I do a lot of talks at middle schools, at high schools, and I find that a large group of our youth don't even think about this as a viable career opportunity, don't take the time to understand how technology can impact their lives or see it as a viable opportunity. And you juxtapose that with the barriers to entry to technology being lower than ever, that's where the divide happens, right? It's if they don't see the value, opportunities can be to their left, to their right, and they're not even taking advantage of them because in their mind, they're miles away. One of the reasons I decided to kick these divide talks off tonight was that one of the largest, more prevalent incubators in the Valley, Y Combinator, launched their latest class of startups today. A total of 75 companies were put in front of investors today. Their largest class ever, what they said was the collective class ever. But at the same time, minority representation from African American, Hispanic, and women was very low, if at any. I have to go back and check the list, but I'm almost positive there were no African Americans, no Hispanics. Then I'm sure there probably were a small amount of women. But when I see these things, on the one hand, you have close to 100 new companies that started today, close to 100 new outlets of opportunity, close to 100 new organizations that may raise money, may employ other people. And if you think about it, we're nowhere near in that ecosystem. So we have to start this conversation, right? And my goal with these Divide Talks is to create a forum where people can come and, whatever knowledge I have, I can share. Whatever knowledge people have around this opportunity, we can share in a collective forum, and people can ask hard questions. The one thing I will tell people is that, my answers are direct, my answers are honest. I'm going to tell you what I think you need to hear versus what you want to hear. But at the same time, I think we need to start having an honest dialogue with ourselves to talk about this opportunity. So the goal of these talks on a weekly basis is to cover a different topic, to allow people the opportunity to ask questions around that topic, to allow us to have dialogue so that you can, and after these talks are over, you can share these with other people and start this to be part of our everyday conversation, right? Why is it when, take today for example, why is it when Y Combinator launches 75 new companies, millions of dollars are going to be invested in these companies over the next couple of weeks? Why is that not an alarm in our community? Why is no one saying, hey, these are close to 75 opportunities that we missed out on? What could we have done differently? What are we doing wrong now? Why haven't I moved on that idea that I had 6 months ago that I've been talking through? If we don't challenge ourselves to have a higher standard and push these things forward and challenge the people around us, then we can't complain when we're not a part of that process. We can't get upset when Instagram gets bought for $1 billion and it was built by 2 guys. We can't get upset when Facebook goes public and makes 100+ new millionaires in the world, because quite frankly, we have nobody to blame but ourselves when we do that. So, I believe that in having these dialogues and people being bold enough to talk about where they are, talk about some of the challenges and questions that they have, will create a what I'll call kind of a rising in terms of people recognizing the opportunity, figuring out that they're comfortable in communicating about that opportunity, and realizing that there's resources around them that a lot of us could start a company right now. A lot of us could create opportunities out of nothing today. And a lot of us, quite frankly, we have nothing to lose. African American minority unemployment in general is at an all-time high. So if you're unemployed, you've been unemployed for multiple months, there's no reason why you can't explore this opportunity to create an opportunity. We realized a long time ago that we don't have opportunities given to us. We create them. In any field that minorities are prevalent, we've created those opportunities. We've never been given them. So why should this be any different? I think people tend to misconceive that because technology is everywhere and it's easy, that it should be given to us, that, hey, they need to create a space for us. But I don't understand why that's even a thought, because the reality is, there are groups of people who don't want us to be involved. There are groups of people who are happy with the fact that, yes, minorities use technology. I create a service on my phone, and they could be the biggest users of it. We dominate Twitter. We dominate Instagram as of late. But no one's come to our community and said, hey, here's the economic opportunities you can create with these products. Here's how you should be thinking about how you can create the next product, because they're happy with us being consumers. And then sadly, we're happy with us being consumers. We're happy with not looking at things outside of the fact of how we can use them to meet with people, how we can use them to stay in tune with things, and not being creative. And if you look at, I try my best to be, an example of how to do that. There's no mistake that the last 10 years of my life has been really focused around companies that deal with our audience, that deal with the minority audience, the African American audience, because I believe that we need to create more examples for ourselves, and that we need to, we need to see that we can have a seat at the table. We need to see that if we do things the right way, that we can create opportunities and investment. And I stress the right way in being that, the other thing we do that we hold ourselves back from is that we enter this space and assume that we don't have to do the same things, we don't have to put the level of effort in to create great products, to research the space that we're trying to go into. We have this misconception that, hey, if we can build a website and we can get maybe some celebrity backing, boom, we're good to go. And that's just not how it works here. I give, from my experience in being in the Valley, there is a right way to do things. And I believe if we learn the right way, we can do things the right way and we can achieve economic opportunity, and there's a level playing field that we can create. I've seen a lot of examples. Some of you may have seen me on the CNN documentary mentoring a group of startups, minority-led startups in the Valley. And the reality is they weren't prepared. They weren't looking at the opportunity for the magnitude of what it is. And people probably thought that was a rare occasion, but I actually see that more than I see people prepare. The New Me Accelerator, which came out of that process, is currently in its third class, and continuing to find better minority startups, giving them the opportunity. But at the same time, there's a limited amount of people who've reached that level, who understand what it means to launch a company, who've done the research, who've garnered the necessary skills to make those opportunities happen. So what we need to do is we need to start the conversations earlier. We need to get more people thinking about that. So as opposed to her having to choose from 20 companies, she can choose from 150 companies. I use the Y Combinator example again. They picked 75 startups, and they said it was their most selective class, which means they got hundreds, if not thousands, of applications. Name 1,000 people who are minorities, who have created or can create technology startups of merit. So when you look at that gap, I want to have the conversation and talk about, why is that? I have thoughts, I have feelings. If people have other examples that they want to bring up, definitely bring those up as well, to have that conversation. We got a couple people in the chat here. Carla.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually typing a question right now.
Okay. Well, you can ask the question. All right.
I know. I was like, well, I already sent it in. But I've heard all these people talking about like this white flight that's supposedly happening from Twitter. Now that Twitter is getting kind of like this reputation for kind of being overrun by black people at certain times of the day, or like Black Twitter, and like all of a sudden there are these kind of services popping up that are being seen as like a white flight from these services. And if we're stigmatized as users in these services, and how do you mobilize and energize people to becoming the creators and not just the users?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the crazy thing about Twitter, I believe, is that it's dominated by minority topics, even when it's not minorities dominating the conversation, right? Like when Waka Flocka is a trending topic, it's not always us. It's actually those same mainstream users who are trying to complain that it's being dominated by African Americans. And I believe, again, everything I look at, I think there's both sides to blame. I think startups in general have a hard time acknowledging when they're dominated by an ethnic group. And I think the reason is their explanation would be that, hey, we don't want to limit ourselves. We appeal to everyone. We don't want people to think that they're shut out. But to me, that's kind of a cop out, because the reality is, if a certain group is driving growth on your product, that's a good group to highlight, right? If you were selling watermelons or candy bars on one side of the street, and all the people were on the other side of the street that wanted to buy them, it's asinine to not go across the street and sell to those consumers. But it happens a lot in the startup space. Now the challenge to that is, when I say it's our fault, is that a lot of the products we create, a lot of the products that appeal to African Americans online now are bottom of the barrel offerings. So they promote the worst of us. So in certain regards, they give mainstream the data to say, this is why we don't want to promote that this audience is here, because we don't want it to veer into that area. We don't want it to veer to be like that type of content. when
Mm-hmm.
it won't. It's it's a mixing part. I mean, but that's the challenge, right? I think on one side we have to be stronger advocates for the power of our audience. I think the one thing Hispanics do better than African Americans is they promote their culture. They're not ashamed to say, "Hey, I'm Hispanic and I'm here and I need you to recognize me." Well, we even in our own demographic groups don't want things to be too black, don't want things to be too color oriented because we don't accept the culture aspect of it, right? We look at the negative connotations of saying that this is a black site, etc.
Well, how
Versus,
are investors looking at it? Like, if you're an investor and you're looking around at the spectrum of places where you can put your money, how are you weighing where to put it? Like if you do see, like, if there were all of a sudden a highbrow kind of like minority product out there that just kind of popped up, would that have some sort of weight over something that's bottom of the barrel, or does everything just kind of weigh the same as an
well,
investor?
so 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 I think there's a couple things to look at there. So I think one is, um, when people talk about startups or companies or entrepreneurial endeavors, like they talk about investors kind of in the same breath, and we kind of have to separate those for one reason is that every company that's created doesn't necessarily have to be an investable company, right? There's a lot of sites specifically in the African American space that are viable businesses that earn a couple million, $5 million a year, but they're not investable companies. They're not companies that a VC would look at.
Mm-hmm.
Because one thing people don't understand about investors is that investors only invest in markets where they think that they can get 10x return, right? They're not going to get a 10x return on World Star Hip Hop, right? It's just not going to happen because of a whole bunch of reasons, because of how he gets his content, the market he caters to, etc. But that doesn't mean that there's not a viable market. I met a company that just launched couple months ago called Cargo Networks that's creating subscription e-commerce for underserved audiences. So they did it for fashion conscious men, but next they're going to do it for African American women, for Hispanic women, and for Indian women. Now, when I heard that, immediately I'm like, from a market share standpoint, those each of those segments are multi and $100 million opportunities, right? Beauty and health for African American women, beauty and health for Hispanic women. Each one of those segments has a market opportunity. So they didn't come out and say we're going to be the black Birchbox. They said, hey, here's data to show that from a financial standpoint, we can make a significant dent into an untapped market. I think the other thing that people do is people think that, hey, if I'm just creating the black version of something, then it's viable, right? I'm not saying that anybody should tomorrow create the black Twitter, but I am saying that people should look at, there's enough needs and opportunities within any demographic market to create companies that service that market in a unique way and make money. The other thing about how investors look at things, I don't think anybody has yet created a viable product geared towards an African American audience in a way that could achieve the multiple. A content site is not going to do it. It has to be a product and service that can transcend levels. I mean, if you look at what's popular now, the roadmap is pretty clear, right? The easiest way to get funded is to build something that creates some type of sustainable revenue, whether it's monthly subscriptions, et cetera. The hardest thing to get funded is something that's consumer internet that's all based on audience growth and eventually needs to be ads and sponsorships. It just is. And I think we don't do our due diligence and look at that as with a discerning eye. We kind of say, oh, well, they're not trying to hear me because it's a black idea or it's a Hispanic idea, et cetera. As opposed to saying, hey, is it a valuable product? If it wasn't you pitching it, would you use it? I mean, that's what people have to ask themselves that question.
Mm-hmm.
Daryl, you had a question, my brother?
Yeah, I did. See, I have this problem. I'm in school right now, and I'm going to school for computer science. But my problem is that I'm constantly thinking of things. and I'm always going in a multiple directions. How do I actually narrow them down, stay on a certain focus, and then still not lose those ideas, put them on the back burner for later? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I have a saying. You'll notice if you hear me talk long enough, I have a lot of sayings. One of my sayings is that ideas are like rear ends. Everybody's got one, right? So, you know, I come up with ideas that are hot in my mind almost every day. Like, boom, if I do this, this will be hot. If I do this, that will be hot. Um, so from a logistical standpoint, I'd say use like Evernote, like jot all those ideas down, right? The reality is if the idea is great when you first think of it, that's fine. But if you go back to that idea in 2 or 3 weeks, if it does it grab your attention the same way, have you found other examples to back it up? One of the key things any entrepreneur has to have is focus, right? Because for two reasons. One is if you have something that other people perceive as a bad idea, you're going to hear all the noise about why you shouldn't do it. If you have something that someone perceives as a good idea, they're going to tell you 100 different variations of how you should do the idea that you came up with. So, my thing is you need to pick the idea that you're most passionate about, and also the idea that you've done research around and said, hey, there's a viable opportunity here. And thirdly, the idea that you can execute on, the idea that you can, based on your skill set, your knowledge, etc., you can execute on. I mean, here, the example I would give people, like, it'd be great to hear that you're at school for computer science, is that people go into this internet field and have no knowledge of technology, have no idea how to build a web page, but they want to run an internet business because they're following the money. That's not where they see themselves and being skills there. They follow the money, but they don't want to do the work, right? They don't want to learn how to code. Oh, it's going to take me too long to learn how to code. They don't want to understand the landscape of how VCs work in the space. They don't want to investigate who their competitors are, but they want to jump in. So the first thing you have to be prepared to do that, right? I mean, the reality is if I was going to launch a hair salon tomorrow, I better know how to do hair, right? I better know how to be, or I'm going to have one customer, the one woman I jack up her hair and she leaves and tells everybody else, right? But we don't look at the internet that way. I mean, true story, I had a guy meet with me a couple years ago and he's like, look, I'm an avid dancer. I think I should launch a site that has people doing dance contests for prizes, putting up their videos, etc. And I'm like, oh, you mean like Dance Jam, the MC Hammer launched? And he's like, what do you mean? Oh, that's live? And so that means, like, he had the idea, right? But he didn't think about what it would take to execute, didn't look and see if there was somebody else doing that idea. The challenge is people have to realize is that there's not many original ideas. There's original executions, right? The guys at Square weren't the first people to think about, hey, you need to make credit card payments mobile, but their execution was unique. They were like, everybody's carrying a smartphone. How do we turn this smartphone into a credit card machine without laying it down with a big case? I mean, that took thought, that took execution, that took investigation in the marketplace. It's not like he woke up one day and that box came into his mind. He had to put thought into it to come up with that idea. We don't do that. So, that would be my suggestion to you is definitely jot down those ideas, go back to them, but really, you have to be your harshest critic. Is this a viable idea? If it wasn't me, how would I use it? How do I expect it to really grow to a company? Because if you don't have that, then someone's going to shut you down at the first obstacle and you're not going to win. You had another question around business plans. What was that question?
It was how do you make a business plan that's not too narrow and not too wide?
Too narrow or too wide? Give me an example. I know you're in a spot there. Give me an example so I can answer the question correctly. When you say too narrow, too wide, what you mean? All right, we lost him. He'll come back. So I'll take a stab at it while he comes back. So, um, too narrow or too wide? Um, well, first, in general, if your business plan is too wide, you're not really solving a problem. It's probably trying to solve a bunch of problems, and you're not going to solve any of them. I think the core of any business should be around, here's a specific itch. I believe I can solve it, and I believe that by solving it, I can build a viable business because there's a bunch of other people who want to solve that same problem. Now, the challenge is, how do you determine that? How do you determine if that itch that you're trying to scratch is an itch that hundreds if not thousands of other people
I
have?
apologize, T-Mobile.
No, all good, man. I glad. So I started answering your question. My initial stance was, if your business plan is too wide, you're probably trying to solve too many problems, so you need to narrow it down. But then, really, if you look at how that itch is, going back to the itch, is how do you determine whether or not it's viable enough that enough other people are having that same problem that if you build a service, they'll be willing to pay for it. They'll be willing to spend a long amount of time on that service. The easiest way to do that, is in my is to not write a business plan, right? Specifically in the technology space, the best way to do that is to put a test out into the marketplace and get real feedback from customers. The time you're spending writing a business plan, someone else is building a prototype of their product. That's where the skills of this space comes in. If you're somebody who wants to get in the internet space, but you can't build your product, then you spend more time finding someone who can build your product, negotiating with that person, getting them to build your vision, taking your vision out of your head and put it in their head, while someone else is building their product. Great example, Dropbox, which is a billion-dollar company. They created a video that articulated what their service was going to be, put it on YouTube, showed people the video, and got people to sign up. And they got a couple thousand people to sign up to that page. So at least they could say, well, these people at least want to see what we're trying to build before they build anything. But they quickly after that want to build it. They didn't put the video up, get 1,000 signatures, and say, hey, now that we know people are interested in Dropbox, let's spend the next 6 months writing a business plan. They said, hey, let's create the minimum viable product to put out and test and see how well those 1,000 people do it. And again, I'll caveat it, but there's 100 types of entrepreneurship. I focus a lot on technology-enabled entrepreneurship because I think that's where the opportunities are. That's where my skill sets are. My advice may not, if you're going to launch a restaurant, may not apply. But I think if you're building something online, these methods apply. The biggest thing, even when you go back to asking about investors don't want to see a business plan. They want to see a product. They want to see you've tested that market, you've shown the viability, you've shown that people will use your product, which is why, again, a lot of African Americans, Hispanics, and women who are in this space aren't getting investments, because if you can't build the product, you're only going to an investor with a business plan. They're not going to fund that, and we're using that to say, hey, that there's a high barrier there. I can't ascertain it, but you can. The barrier is there, but you can overcome that barrier if you can build a product. It's not enough to have a great idea, because everybody has those ideas. So I hope that answers your question, Daryl. I know you're fading in and out, but you're going to have to watch the replay to get the nuggets, so I don't keep going. Daryl, you back? All right, he's back, but he can't hear. Let me see if we got any questions from Twitter. Daryl, I answered your question, buddy, so you may have to catch the replay. So I'm looking at Twitter. Now we have some watchers who aren't in the chat. Shoot me a tweet if you have a question. Oh, wait a minute. People said they're in the Hangout, but nothing's happening. Hold on. Are they in the wrong Hangout? Let's check. Let me go to Twitter here. Let me see. Hold on, guys. Let's make sure we get people in here. Let me go here and see this. Nope, there's no one there. So you guys got the invite to my Hangout. Why didn't these people get in the Hangout? Give me 2 seconds. Let me figure this out. If you actually go to Hangout. So if anybody's watching in the RSVP for the Hangout and didn't get in, check your Google Plus page for the invite. I just sent the invite again, so you can join. I'll do it one more time. You can also send me questions on Twitter, and I'll answer those questions as well while you're trying to get in. While we wait for those questions, one of the topics I want to talk about is technology businesses versus technology-enabled businesses. So most of the companies that are created today are not technology businesses. They are technology-enabled businesses. So they use a technology good or a service to sell goods or commerce or to create a value for other people. Great example. So if you launch, there's a service called Shopify that for $20 a month you can launch an e-commerce site. So if you launch your e-commerce store on Shopify, you're selling your goods and you're making money and everything's fantastic, that is a technology-enabled business. It is not a technology business. If you build Twitter, if you build Facebook, that is a technology business. It's a key distinction. Technology-enabled businesses are a lot easier to get into. There are more, there are tools, there's services. Anything you're getting into, there's a tool or service. If you are a independent vendor and you need to take credit cards and you use Square, you have a technology-enabled business. There was another startup I saw that allowed you, if you own a retail store, to use iPads as self-serve kiosks, etc. That is a technology-enabled business. And people don't understand that there's a lot of businesses that they are in that can become technology-enabled business. If the one example I always give is, let's say you have two flower stores, one in the inner city and one in the suburbs. The one in the inner city is closer to everyone. The one in the inner city has more traffic going in front of it. But the one in the suburbs has started taking credit card transactions with Square, has started taking online orders by creating a Shopify account, has been able to allow people on their Twitter and Facebook page to get access to deals and specials. That is a technology-enabled business. You're using technology to enable you to reach a larger, enable you to get higher revenues, to connect it. It sounds simple, but it's something that you want to have in your vernacular when you're helping people understand that getting involved in this space is a lot easier than you would think. When you talk to people when I talk to a lot of kids about technology, they're like, well, I'm not that good at math. I'm not that good at the subjects I need. But they don't understand is not everybody in this space is a hardcore programmer. They have an understanding of the space and they use the tools. I call myself the MacGyver of the internet. because you can't put a problem in front of me that I can't solve with a Google search. So technology-enabled business versus technology business is a key thing. So we got a question from Twitter. Working on a book on health and wellness. Any suggestions on how to use social media, internet to engage an audience? So I think social media is like, what is it like? Social media today is like engage an audience. So I think. All right, good. So I can close this YouTube. Like, we got people on. Hold on one second. Social media today is like. Because I hear myself and I don't want to. 1 second, let me find that window. All right, so if you join and you got YouTube playing, mute that YouTube because I hear myself. If working on a book, Health and Wellness, any suggestions on how to use social media and engage an audience? So the beauty and the curse of the internet is that anyone can get on. And what I mean by that is anyone can create an identity, anybody can create a presence just by sheer perseverance. So, let's take YouTube, for example. There are thousands of people who have created identities for themselves, who have created personas of themselves just by using YouTube to connect to a large audience. The same thing on Twitter. I think the key to any of those and the way you be successful is to create an authentic presence, right? Anybody who you follow on a regular basis, anybody who you inquire to on a regular basis, I believe it creates presences on those platforms. You're not going to follow somebody who doesn't appear knowledgeable, who doesn't appear passionate about what they're doing. So anything you're doing that you're passionate about, whether it's a business, whether it's a nonprofit project, it's about getting that message out and understanding that it's a process. Continuing to be consistent, sending that message out. Eventually, people will start finding it. It's a grind. But what people are constantly searching for authentic voices in various areas across the internet. I mean, the other thing you should think about is the perfect time to start is yesterday. And what I mean by that is a lot of times we'll have ideas around, hey, that I want to start a business. Hey, I should build a website. Hey, I should start getting involved online. And we'll psych ourselves out by saying that it needs to plan and be perfect. And the next thing you know is 6 months later, you're still talking about, hey, I need to build a website. Hey, I need to get it online. And it's a year later, and I'll be honest, I do it myself. When I got the idea for the Close the Divide project, it was such a big idea in my head that I started planning it. Hey, it needs to be like this. I need to partner with these people. And I found myself a couple months later not having done anything, right? And even today with these chats, I've had the idea for Divide Talks in my head for about 2 months. And I was like, well, I need to wait until I get ready. Hey, I need to make sure I get a haircut the day before. Like, all of that stuff kind of factors in, and you don't get anything done. So anybody who's looking to penetrate, the luxury of the internet is that you can penetrate right now, right? You launch a Twitter account, I can guarantee you in a half an hour you'll have 1 follower. If you keep pushing up, you're going to have 5 more followers after that. Outside, if you're not a celebrity, no one jumps on Twitter and 2 days later has 1 million followers. It just doesn't happen. There's that churn. You continue to be, you put your own knowledge out there. Like, I don't talk about bricklaying. I don't talk about selling insurance because I don't know about either of those things. I talk about what I know, and it becomes natural. And then, you find other people who have similar interests, and you communicate with them, and then they start realizing, hey, this person has the same knowledge as me. Let me promote them to a larger audience, and it just happens. The key thing is consistency. If you can't launch a Twitter account, tweet once a day, only one thing, and expect it to grow. Like, you have to have a focus to it. You have to commit to keeping engaged and keeping interaction, and use multiple mediums. I think the other luxury that's happening right now is that there's so many places that you can create your presence. There's no reason why you shouldn't create your presence on multiple places. Great example, right? There's a service I use when I do speeches. It's called Spreaker. That basically, when I do a speech, I press record. I put my iPhone there. it records the speech, and then I can send it on Twitter. So I'm using one medium to promote something in another medium. I'm seeing myself steadily get followers on Spreaker, but also the people who follow me on Twitter are able to hear those speeches. So and you're mixed. There's nobody who can say do A, B, and C, boom, with success. You got to find your mix. How I got to that point is when I first started being active online, I would write a lot. But the other challenge I had was more and more I have less time to sit down and write my thoughts. So I started using other mediums. I use Spreaker. I've started using Social Cam because the important piece is getting your thoughts out, right? And then the other side, if you're not somebody who likes talking, if you're not somebody who likes being on camera, then write it out, right? Find services that promote your writing and use them and put that in Twitter. Whatever your medium, whatever your gift, whatever your skill is, use that to deliver the medium because people are hungry for information when it's authentic. Let me check and see if we got any questions here. I noticed that there were about 5 other people in that other hangout, whichever hangout that was. I'm sending invites. If you RSVP'd, I'm sending invites out every 2 minutes. You should check your Google Plus page. Let me check the Google Plus page and see if there's any comments, just to make sure I'm not missing anybody. All right, so I got a question. So what if I am not a technical person and I want to have a technology-enabled business? I would say that the first thing to do is to come up with what that business is going to be. The second thing I would say is go to Google and do a search on how you would describe that business and see anyone else is doing it. 9 times out of 10, don't get discouraged. There's someone else doing something similar than what you thought of. See what they're doing well, see what they're not doing, see what they employ. You have that mindset. Okay, there's 5 other people who are doing X, Y, and Z. I believe I can fill the gap here. Now I need to move forward. And secondly, you need to figure out what skills you need. What skills do you need to achieve that quickly? Like I said earlier, the hardest thing to do is start. So you want to start. So if start means build a WordPress blog that tells people about your business and see if they react to it. If start means build a Twitter account. I mean, there's a service called LaunchRock where you can set up your page today and have people sign up. Just say what your business is going to be, say coming soon, have people sign up, promote on Twitter, and you can gauge it there. But at the very last piece, I believe, is gaining technical literacy, right? Here's the thing. If you have to ask somebody how to do everything in every aspect of your business, then after a while, it's no longer your business. It's someone else's business, the people who have the expertise. And again, in the internet, it's a weird thing where people are okay with that, which kind of goes back to people being desperate for funding, because instead of saying, hey, I'm going to learn how to do it, they're saying, hey, well, if I just had that money, I would go hire somebody. But how are you going to know who to hire? How are you going to know if they can do the things you need them to do? If they don't do the things they're going to do and they spend your money, then what are you going to do? Because not only do you not have a product, then you have an investor who you owe money to who doesn't see a product. So if you take all that energy and focus it on, hey, what are the key skills that I need to have, and just start learning them, right? I mean, there's so many services. There's Code Year by a company called Code Academy, which sends you weekly emails, and within a few months you know HTML and you know JavaScript. Now you may never code HTML, you may never code JavaScript, but at least you understand what it's supposed to look like. You understand how it's supposed to work. So now when you go hire somebody and they show you something, you can be like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. I think it should work this way. You at least are a knowledgeable contractor or a contract hire. There's another service called Code School. Khan Academy, which I love, just launched a coding computer science section. If for no other reason, you should learn how to understand the environment that you're about to enter. The analogy I keep using, and I used it a little earlier tonight, if I was going to start a hair salon, I better know how to do hair, right? I got one client, this jacked up woman who's walking around telling everybody not to come back to my shop because I don't know what I'm doing. It's the same thing with technology. You don't know how many people email me links, send me things about their companies, and I look at their sites, and it's obvious they have no idea what you're doing, right? The idea might be sound, the concept may have made sense, but they didn't do the research, they don't know how to apply it, and they're mad at the world because nothing's coming valuable from it. So I think, to me, if you don't consider yourself technical, do the research. The other thing is, understanding what it takes to run a successful internet business is easier now than ever because people are telling you. Like there's blogs. I think I have a blog roll on my site where like venture capitalists who have funded Twitter and all these other big companies write blogs about what you need to learn. Fred Wilson, who's a big venture capitalist in New York City, writes a blog every day called Ask a VC. On Mondays, he does MBA Mondays. He talks about stock. He talks about how to hire good people. So really, if you want that information, it's out there. You just got to put the effort in and do it. And again, if you're not willing to do that, then quite honestly, you're not willing to run a company because the challenges that come are much more bigger than the challenges it takes to start. You have to factor those things in when you think about running a company. So checking Twitter again. Question, do you provide consulting services to companies? We'd love to discuss. info@maxlevsolutions.com. You can shoot me an email. Any questions from the panel here in the chat? We've been going for about an hour. I've been talking nonstop for about an hour, which is crazy. But, let me check before I miss anybody. So, all right, so I think I got everybody. My goal is to do this every Tuesday night. I'm going to encourage people throughout the week on Twitter to give me comments. I actually do a radio show on Praise Charlotte on Thursdays called Tech Thursdays, where we cover topics really quickly. But I think this could be an extension of that. I may even ask Melanie who's the co-host there, to join me sometimes. But my goal for these are to cover things that I believe that people should be knowledgeable about, to allow people the opportunity to ask questions of not just me, but to the group. And also, if you have a company, if you have an idea, and you're looking to vet it and see how you can do it, I'm always open to answer questions. But we're going to keep this thing going. So if you enjoyed it, send the link. It'll be on YouTube a few minutes after we're done. Promote to your friends. We got to have this dialogue. We want to get more people in, get some spirited conversation, and we're going to start closing the divide. Thank you guys for joining me, and I'll see you again next week at 9:30. God bless.
Thanks.
Thanks, Navarro.
You.